In the caverns of lore, ugly and obscure, shines the gold of truth. The Heartland High Elves, the splinter group of the Altmer who would become enveloped in infamy, the Aylids. Few societies in Tamrielic history can boast the same potential as this race of Mer. They were wise, magically gifted, and ambitious, but their legacy was built on hubris. If there's one lesson I've learned from studying the Aylids, it is the following. An empire built on stone and steel will succeed, but an empire built on blood, bones, and brutality will break. The Nine Divines say, above all else, be good to one another. That simple precept is documented in the 10 Commands of the Nine Divines, and it encompasses all of their teachings. But why is it so important? Isn't that an obvious lesson? What comes of neglecting the lessons of the Aedra? Well, the ancient Aylids know full well the answer to those questions, but when their pride ceased to obscure their vision, it was already too late. The Aylids famously said, wear law as your armour, but it seems that the wisdom of their law was overcome by their lofty aspirations, and they resorted to cruelty and corruption to build their bloody empire. Hey guys, it's Drew here and welcome back to Fudge Muppet. In this video I'm going to tell you the story of the Aylid Elves of the Heartland, the region we would now call Cyrodiil. If you've heard of the Aylids, you'll know they were once a prosperous race, and remnants of their magnificent structures still defy the elements in the countryside. My aim is to delve into not only what made the Aylids so great, but also why they were destined to fail. The histories do not paint a pretty picture of the Heartland Elves, but their story might not be concluded, as I believe the Aylids are still out there influencing modern histories as yet unwritten, pulling the strings of Tamrielic politics, all from behind the masquerade of the other elven races. Don't worry, I plan to back up all of these bold claims soon enough, so let's get right into it. The Kai'mer are famous for their pilgrimage across Tamriel, becoming the Changed Ones on their journey to Resdayn, or modern-day Morrowind. But they are by no means the only group of elves to splinter from the early Aldmer on the Somerset Isles. The Aylids left Alinor in the Malefic era, and chose Tamriel's heartland as the location for their new empire. One major difference between the two sets of travellers is the fact that the Aylids did not undergo a drastic physical transition. They continued to look almost identical to the High Elves, just with slightly darker skin. Another crucial difference is their respective pantheons. While the Aldmeri Elves were the first to worship the Aedra, they were also the first to venerate the Daedra. The Kai'mer followed Boethiah, Azura and Mephala for example. The Kai'mer actually cut ties with the Aedra for the most part, which the Aylids did not do. You'd think that that would bode worse for the Kai'mer, but they were savvy enough to make the distinction between the good and the bad Daedra, however subjective that may be. They acknowledge how Boethiah's attitude could make them more resilient. They fed Azura's vanity in exchange for her valuable domestic information, and they studied Mephala's intricate web for secret strategies, making them deadly to their rivals. What they also did was isolate the four most malevolent Daedra, in their estimation, and they warned their people not to meddle with them. These four Daedra became known as the House of Troubles, and consisted of Molag Bal, Mehrunes Dagon, Malakath, and Sheogorath. So why is this relevant to the Aylids? Well, reverence for the Daedra amongst the Aylids was not quite so pervasive initially, but when it took hold, it was insidious, spreading like a silent sickness. Unlike the Kai'mer, the Aylids didn't play favourites with the Aedra or the Daedra, and it seems their veneration was focused on the entities who could best serve the interests of the Aylid Empire. Surprise, surprise, the reprehensible Daedra lords were the ones to capitalise on this arrangement. Even the most heinous princes were subsequently subjected to mass worship. One such prince is Molag Bal, the Schemer and the Harvester of Souls. To clarify, scarce little remains of the Aylids that isn't in ruin, and I can't point you to definitive proof of Bal's involvement in the form of shrines or statues, but his sphere was profuse in their culture. The gradual corruption of the Aylid conscience across the late Malefic era and the First era reeks of Molag Bal. The Aylids began cutting deals with the Daedra lords, acquiring blessings, unnatural advantages, and greater power. It is documented that they certainly worked with Mehrunes Dagon, and given the nature of his sphere, Clavicus Vile was likely involved as well, fulfilling wishes and brokering wages. All of their dealings with the Daedra helped them grow their empire, but it was with Molag Bal's sphere that the Aylids really excelled. Enforced with an iron fist, with overwhelming numbers and the aid of Daedra armies, the Aylids preyed upon the vulnerable outnumbered Nedic human vagrants moving across the Heartlands. They raided settlements, killing the useless and making slaves of all those capable of working. The Aelids implemented slavery, domination and cruelty, and no doubt Molag Bal was satisfied to see it. On the backs of countless human thralls, the Aelids created a booming society. The subjugation of an entire race brought prosperity to the captors. Slaves were utilised for agricultural work, for the building and maintaining of their empire's glorious infrastructure and architecture, but most egregious of all, they were turned into sources of entertainment. Crossing the line into Daedra worship is a perilous endeavour without restraint. It's easy to imagine how revering a sadistic prince could lead to the entire race becoming sadistic themselves. As much as it pains me to dwell on the topic, I will go into detail about their entertainment soon. But it is no wonder that records of the Aelids documented by their former victims portray them as monstrous bellicose tyrants. When the Divines say be good to one another, it should be a given, but they emphasise the importance of this tenet because they know how easily cruelty can be abused. All it takes is one bad idea to cause suffering on a grand scale, and as far as the culprits are concerned, their crimes against mortality are bearing fruit. With domination comes growth. They built a wondrous empire on the shoulders of innumerable needs, and it was only a matter of time before the burden proved too heavy to bear. All of this sprouted from one mistake, allowing Daedra worship to go unregulated. It truly is a shame, because as I hinted at earlier, this race had so much potential. The Aelids were an innovative people with a unique outlook on Mundus. They were obsessed with the number 8, and this played a big part in the foundation of the 8 Divines, the dominant religion of Tamriel to this day. Magic was an enormous aspect of their society. They revered Magnus the Architect, and Meridia, the Daedric prince and former member of the Magna Gi. They believed the world was composed of 4 elements: earth, water, air and light. Not fire, but light. This element was the focal point for much of their culture and architecture. They considered starlight to be the sublime element that linked the mortal realm of Mundus to the realm of the Aedra Aetherius. This explains their Aelid wells, forged from meteoric iron to harness the energy of the starlight. Even now, thousands of years after they were left to erode, mages can replenish their magicka at these wells. They cut meteoric glass into Welkind stones and Vala stones, which could store magical auras. The Aelids fell long before they could truly tap the potential of these magics, but even in the early stages of development, this starlight, through these meteoric vessels, could transmit memories directly to the reader. It is rumoured that overuse of these crystals could cause a problem of capacity for mortals. Had the Aelids not brought about their demise, they could have achieved so much, but instead these ancient sorceries remain tragically untouched. So when the Aelids were consumed by avarice and turned to the Daedra for help, it really was a shame. Had they been patient and honest in their advancements, they surely would have reached the same heights eventually. But instead, with brutality, their empire flourished at an alarming pace, a pace not possible through honest means. At this point, it would seem like a fair argument to say that I'm being too harsh on the Aelids. They're not the only ones to use slavery. The economies of various Dunmeri regions revolve around slavery after all. Why are the Aelids so much worse? Well, there are a number of answers to that question, and a lot of the time history isn't fair. The victors write the history, and it just so happens that almost all we know about the Aelids was written by the Imperials, the Elysian Needs formerly owned by the Aelids. They have every justification under the sun to exaggerate the malevolence of their disgraced masters. Also, the Dunmer still exist. It's not like the Argonians annexed Morrowind into Blackmarsh. If they had done that, and the Dark Elves were wiped out, I'm sure the Argonians would vilify them in their histories too. Regardless, the main reason the Aelids are perceived to be the worst, the most arrogant, and the most sadistic is because of that entertainment I spoke of before. Morahouse, the winged man-ball, the demigod hero and consort of Saint Alesia, spoke of the horrors in his memoirs when recounting the sadistic art tortures created by the Aelids. The human slaves were so undeserving of basic mortal rights that butchering them did not evoke any remorse or empathy in the masses of elves. Morahouse claimed that some men would become art tortures for strange pleasures, as in the wailing wheels of Vindazel and the gut gardens of Cercin, and flesh sculpture, which was everywhere among the slaves of the Aelids in those days. Or worse, the realms of the Fire King Hadhul, where the begetting of drugs drawn from the admixture of Daedrons into living hosts let one inhale new visions of torment, and children were set aflame for nighttime tiger sport. The Aelids were not content to simply use slaves for practical ends. Their brutality even pervaded into the arts. Slaves would build their cultural hubs, whether it be courtyards or galleries or arenas, and the slaves would also serve as the spectacles, put through unthinkable horrors for the amusement of the Aelids. This demonstrates just how far their debauchery had festered. Cruelty for the good of advancement can be justified if you're willing to suppress your moral compass, but cruelty for pleasure is where the cultural rot sets in. Above all else, be good to one another. Just as the 10 commands of the Divines warned the Aelids not to let their hubris overcome their compassion, it also foretold their downfall. Heedless, the wicked man turns away, and forsaking the simple wisdoms granted to him by the all-wise and the all-knowing Nine, he lives in sin and ignorance all the days of his life. He bears the awful burdens of his crimes, and before men and God his wickedness is known, and neither blessing nor comfort may he expect from the altars and shrines of the Nine. For a race so fond of remembering one's law, it is ironic that the Aelids couldn't scry their destruction in the commands of their gods. The harder the Aelids pulled on the chains of their servants, the more severe the reckoning would be when the links finally snapped. And when it came in the form of Saint Alicia and her rebellion. It also came in the form of Pellinal Whitestrake, a champion of Shazar or Lorkhan. With the backing of the Divines and the Nords, and even some of the radical Aelid lords who'd grown disillusioned by the cultural hedonism, the Elysian rebellion toppled the Aelid kingdoms and took the White Gold Tower for the Imperials. The Divines had been patient with the Aelids, giving them ample opportunity to reform, but when their tyranny remained malignant, they were forced to intervene. Elysia, Morahouse, Pellinal, and the human rebels were sent to punish the elves for their crimes. The Daedra had offered the Aelids immediate advantages, fulfilling their superficial desires, helping them build an empire on an ersatz foundation. It was destined to crumble. From here the Aelids began to fade into obscurity. Some Aelid kings remained in power as vassals to Empress Elysia. This proves that not all of the Aelids were complicit to the horrors that define their culture. Either way, there hasn't been a sighting of a living Aelid in over 1,000 years, and many scholars would simply say that the Aelids have gone extinct. But this is where I want to leave you with one hypothetical. It is well documented that an Aelid diaspora occurred. Many of the Heartland elves sought refuge in other provinces. Some, like the ones who went north, were wiped out by the Nords, but others were successful. Some made it to the Isle of Balfiera, where the Doreni elves ruled, and others made it to Valenwood, and even back to Somerset. As a result, it is speculated that the Aelids assimilated with the other elves and their nobility. I said earlier that the Aelids were almost identical in appearance to the High Elves, and their slightly tanned skin could allow them to mingle into Bosmeri society as well. With this in mind, it is quite possible that the Aelids played a part in the politics of these societies. Take the Doreni dynasty defeating the Elysians at the Battle of Glenumbra Moors, for example. Leloriar and Dainar, the last king of the Aelids, aided the Elysian rebellion, and maintained control over Nenalata when the tyrants were overthrown. He was eventually forced to flee to High Rock, where he became a tactician in the Doreni army. Dainar was there when the Doreni triumphed over the Elysian Order, and his strategies played a part in their victory. There is also a theory that Mankar Cameron could even be an Aelid. He claims to have pure Bosmer parentage, yet he is an Altmer with slightly tanned skin. That would explain a lot of his motives, and it would explain why his paradise coincidentally looks like an Aelid's idea of paradise. It is a piece of Aelid architecture that hasn't been destroyed by the years, and by the revolting human slaves. Mankar himself claims to have altered his biology by cutting himself with Mehrunes' razor, and if this happens to be true and not a fabrication, it seems more likely that he turned himself into an Aelid. And finally, if the Aelids successfully assimilated into the nobility of Somerset, that could certainly explain a lot of the Falmer's subjugation of mankind, and the suppression of their idols. Anywhere there are elves discriminating humans, it is entirely possible that remnants of the old corrupt Aelid Empire are a part of the machinations. They could very well be extinct, but there is always a chance that they are hidden in plain sight, plotting their revenge on the humans. And there you have it guys, my take on the Aelid Empire. I hope you enjoyed the video, thanks so much for watching, my name is Drew and I shall see you in the next one.